Okay, so now we will start. And today's date is October 3rd, 2020.
Yes.
And we will start with the homage to the Buddha. And please mute your microphones. Everybody please mute, except when you want to speak. Okay, so we'll start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arhato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arhato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so in last week's class, we dealt with, I call this the roller coaster of karma, how people are moving within samsara from bad destinations or states of misery to good destinations, states of happiness. Then sometimes they fall to lower states of misery, rise up again. So those suttas are dealing with, called the samsara, with the round of rebirth. Now in the suttas that we're going to be taking over the course of today, these will be suttas that deal with higher levels of meditative attainment. And we'll find in these suttas distinctions made between different classes or different types of practitioners. And this is something that's quite maybe distinctive in the Buddha, especially in the Buddha's teaching, the way he's able to map out different paths that people take within the broad context of the Noble Eightfold Path. So there are different approaches to the development of the path, different, let's say, different roads leading to the same destination. And the first of these suttas makes a distinction of four kinds of persons. And so first we come to the brief statement, the ascetic unshaken, the red lotus ascetic, the white lotus ascetic, and then one called the delicate ascetic among ascetics. And the word that's translated as ascetic here the word is samana. And the word samana, maybe the word ascetic is a little bit misleading since it suggests somebody who is deliberately inflicting some kind of affliction upon themselves, but that's not what is intended. But by the word ascetic is meant somebody, by the word samana, is meant one who has left the household life, the home life, in order to take up a course of spiritual training. And so the Buddha himself was called a samana. His contemporaries referred to him as the Samana Gotama. And the Buddhist monks were also called samana. They were called the Sakya Putiya Samana, the ascetics who follow the son of the Sakyans. The son of the Sakyans is the Buddha, and those who follow him are the Sakya Putiya Samana. Okay, so first we have the statement of the four types, concise statement, and then we come to the analysis or explanation of them. The first is called the ascetic unshaken. And in Pali, this is the samanam achalo. And this is the word that gives the title to the chapter, to this particular chapter. Somebody asked last week, why is this chapter called Machalo? And it's named after this particular type of ascetic. And the word achala means unshakable. And so this is the ascetic who is unshakable. And then comes the explanation of this type. How is somebody an ascetic who is unshaken or unshakable? And then comes the definition. It's explained in terms of the monk or bhikkhu who is a trainee practicing the way, who dwells aspiring for the unsurpassed security from bondage. And all of these words here are quite significant. Okay, then comes a simile to illustrate this type of ascetic. It's like the eldest son of a head anointed kshatriya king, one who is due to be anointed, but has not yet been anointed. So this is the eldest son who is the heir to the throne. So it's said that he has attained the unshaken, in that he is bound to be anointed when his father dies. So he's destined to become a head anointed king. So he's not yet been anointed, not yet been coronated, but he's next in line to the throne. And so that image that illustrates the disciple who is the trainee, practicing the way, aspiring to the supreme security from bondage. Okay, so first here we have the word seka, and this is derived from the verb sikati, which means to train. So a seka is one in training, but the word seka usually has a more precise meaning. It doesn't just mean any disciple in training, but it means one who has entered the irreversible path to the final goal. And this entering the irreversible path comes with the entering upon the path of stream entry. Okay, so once the disciple enters the path of stream entry, then that disciple is bound to attain stream entry within that life itself. And once a person becomes a stream enterer, then they have at most 7 more existences before they attain the final goal of the Buddha's path, before attaining arhatship. So this is why this person is called an ascetic who is unshakable, who cannot be shaken, because this disciple who has become the trainee, one who has entered upon the training, is bound to reach the final goal in at most 7 more lives. And so the disciple is also called patipaddo. So this is from an adjective based on the noun patipada, which means the path or the practice. So this is one who is definitely on the path, who is irreversible. And then the person is aspiring, yearning for anuttarang yoga kemang. So the unsurpassed security from bondage. So this is an expression that means nibbana. So this person hasn't yet attained nibbana, but they have this yearning, this aspiration for the final goal, and they are definitely bound to attain that goal. So this is why the person is called an ascetic who is unshakable, who cannot be shaken away from the path, but will follow that path life after life until they reach the final goal. And they could reach that final goal within this life itself, in the next life, after several lives, but at most 7 more lives, no more lives beyond that. Okay, next comes the person who is called the white lotus ascetic. And the Pali expression here is samana pundarika. Let me increase the size. So the pundarika is a white lotus flower, and it's going to be contrasted with the next ascetic, who is the samana paduma. The paduma, and this is what's in Sanskrit, padma, that is the red lotus. Pundarika is the white lotus. Okay, so the difference between the pundarika, the white lotus, and the red lotus, it's said in the commentary, whether this is a fact of botany, this I don't know for sure, but it's said that the white lotus has fewer than 100 petals, whereas the red lotus has the full 100 petals. So I'm not so familiar with the different types of lotuses. I can judge them only by the color, but I've never tried to count the petals of the lotus flower. Okay, so why is one type of ascetic called the white lotus ascetic, like the lotus with fewer than 100 petals? So here comes the definition of the white lotus ascetic. So it's said that with the destruction of the taints, that is the asavas, the monk has realized for himself with direct knowledge in this very life the taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom. So these are expressions for arhatship, taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom. And having entered upon it, he dwells in it. Yet, here comes the qualifying phrase, he does not dwell having touched with the body the 8 emancipations. And this expression, touched or contacted with the body, shouldn't be taken literally. It doesn't mean that you touch these states of liberation with the physical body. But the way I understand this is that one experiences these liberations. The experience is so strong, so powerful, that it seems as if one is experiencing them with the body. Or perhaps we could say it's a mental experience, but the experience is so strong that it has an impact, a kind of transformative impact on the physical body. And then the key word here are the 8 emancipations. So what are these 8 emancipations? They're not, first, the Pali word that's used. The Pali word that's used is vimokkha. And it's from the verb vi plus much. And from this verb, we also get the noun vimutti, which is what I translate as liberation. And so we have 2 nouns based on this verb vimucchati. And in theory, one could use the 2 nouns interchangeably. But in actual practice, the 2 words are generally used in the text with somewhat different nuances. The word vimutti, especially when we have the expression liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, this particular compound is used, or this particular expression is used to designate the attainment of arhatship. So ceto vimutti, panya vimutti equals arhatship. There are various kinds of ceto vimutti, liberation of mind, that are not equivalent to arhatship. For example, we have the expression metta ceto vimutti. This is the liberation of mind through loving kindness. So somebody who develops very, very deep loving kindness to the point where the mind enters into the jhanic state through loving kindness, that is a liberation of mind. It's a ceto vimutti, but it's not a panya vimutti. It's not liberation by wisdom. So the liberation of mind by loving kindness is a temporary liberation of mind. It's a very beautiful state, very exalted state, but it doesn't involve the eradication of the bonds, the fetters that tie one to the cycle of birth and death. Also, okay, somebody develops very deep meditation on non-self, and that could be called the sunyato ceto vimutti. It's the liberation of mind through emptiness by doing insight contemplation on non-self. And so the mind is temporarily liberated from defilements, from hindrances, through the contemplation of non-self. But it is not yet the permanent liberation of arhatship. So there are various kinds of Ceto Vimutti that are spoken about in the early Buddhist suttas, but most of them, if they're simply Ceto Vimutti, different types of Ceto Vimutti, they're not states of final or ultimate liberation. But what is equivalent to the ultimate liberation, the liberation of arhatship, is Ceto Vimutti combined with Panya Vimutti, liberation of mind that's also liberation by wisdom. Okay, the other noun derived from the verb vimucchati is vimokkha, which is what I translate for distinction as emancipation. And this is also a temporary emancipation or liberation of the mind. And the commentary explains this word vimokkha, why it's called emancipation. Let me increase. So the commentary raises the question, in what sense are these states called emancipations? Then it says, in the sense of releasing. And by releasing here is meant thoroughly freeing, but temporarily, thoroughly freeing from opposed qualities. And in the sense of taking a thorough delight in the object, being freely able to immerse oneself in the object of meditation. And so it said that what is meant here is the mind's occurring on the object without any hindrance, free from worry. And it compares this to a child sleeping on his father's lap, and the child is completely relaxed, completely confident when sleeping on the father's lap. Okay, then the text refers to the 8 emancipations. And so now let's see what these 8 emancipations are. And we find an explanation of them. If you want to find the actual definition, you also still remain in the Anguttara Nikaya, but you go to the Book of the Eights, and we find them in Sutta number 66. And these practices, I have to say, in contemporary Buddhism, have almost fallen by the wayside. Exactly what is meant by them, even I think by the age of the commentators, the meaning had already become obscure. And so the commentary gives explanations, but I'm not certain that the explanation that the commentary gives was the meaning originally intended in the suttas themselves. But we have no other source to turn to for explanation of these states but the commentaries. Okay, so the first emancipation, it said, one possessing form sees forms. And to get the explanation, we go, or to get a translation of the commentary, we go to the footnote. So first, the Pali is rupi. So rupi is a personal noun based on the noun rupa. So rupa is material form. And then based on this, we have the noun rupin, one who has material form. So one who has material form sees forms. And then this is the commentary explains that form here is the jhana with a form object, which has arisen by way of a blue kasina or some other kasina, based on something internal, such as the head hairs. And so one who gains this jhana is said to possess form. Or, it goes on, one might also see forms with the eye of jhana externally, such as a blue kasina and so on. And so what is indicated are the four form sphere jhanas in the case of a person who has attained jhana through the kasinas with either an internal or an external basis. Okay, that's the explanation, and now I'm going to have to elaborate on this. So first, what is meant by a kasina? Normally, the word kasina indicates a constructed object of meditation, of which there are 8 primary kasinas. 4 of these represent the elements. We have the earth kasina, the water kasina, the fire kasina, and the wind kasina, or the air kasina. So the earth kasina is constructed by taking a wooden band, or it could be a metal band, forming it into a circle, and then one fills in that space created by the circle, one fills it in with clay or mud, but clay is better because you can smooth it out, to represent the property of the earth. And then one will place that kasina on a support some distance, a few yards away from one's seat, and then one focuses on that object, looking at it with the eyes, focusing on it, and directing the thought to it, earth, 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 until one can obtain a inwardly visualized image of that earth kasina. When one can gain a very clear, very distinct, mentally visualized image of the earth kasina, then one doesn't have to rely on the external object anymore. Though one can return to it if the mental image becomes obscure, but one goes on focusing upon the mentally visualized image until there emerges from the mentally visualized image another kind of inwardly perceived image, which is bright, luminous, very clear, radiant, distinct, and that is called the counterpart object, the counterpart of the original kasina object. And then one goes on focusing on that counterpart object until the mind becomes more and more deeply immersed in that object. And when the mind becomes thoroughly immersed in the object, that is the attainment of the first jhana based on the earth kasina. So that is the earth kasina. Instead of earth, one could use a bowl of water to represent the water element. So that will be the water kasina. So one takes a bowl of clear, clean water, places it in front of you, and then you go on focusing upon that water with your eyes open, directing the thought to the water, 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 until you get the inwardly visualized image of the water. Then you focus on the mental object representing water. For the fire kasina, and this gets a little dangerous, so I don't recommend you do this. I just mentioned what it is, but I caution against it. Probably the yogis would have to do this outside. One starts a fire, it has to be a big fire, like a bonfire, and in front of it, at some distance, one would put, maybe today we would use a cardboard stand, or maybe a wooden stand with a hole cut out. The hole should be about the height of one's seat. Then one sits and one looks at the fire through the hole, focusing the mind on the fire that you're seeing through the hole, focusing upon that fire with the thought, fire, fire, fire. Doing this over and over until one can get that clear, visualized mental object or mental representation of the fire. That becomes the mental fire object. And then one will go on focusing upon the initial mental object until the counterpart object emerges in almost a bright, radiant, almost self-sustaining mental image of the fire. Then the fourth element kasina is the air kasina or wind kasina. And this has always been rather obscure to me. It's said that one will look at something like a bush of leaves or some grass in the wind, which is blowing in the wind, and that will give one the impression of the wind or the air. So I don't see how you could use that as a steady object of contemplation. So I will just pass that over. So those are four kasinas representing the four primary elements. The other four kasinas represent colors. So there is the blue kasina. In that case, to create the initial kasina, you would take a circular block of wood. Then one has it painted blue, a deep blue, smooth, the surface has to be smooth. And then one sets that circular block in front of you on a stand and focuses upon that circular object, directing the thought to it, blue, 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 until the initial mental object arises. Then one focuses upon the mental object, blue, 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 until the counterpart object emerges, that radiant, bright, luminous, self-sustaining image of a blue circle. And then one goes on focusing on that with the thought blue, 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 until the mind becomes absorbed in it, in the jhana. So there's the blue kasina, the red kasina, the yellow kasina, and the white kasina. So the procedure is the same in each case. All that's differing here are the colors. Then there are two other kasinas. One of these is called the light kasina. In that case, you would take light. You might look briefly, very briefly at the sun to get the impression of the sunlight. Or you might have maybe a place where the sunlight is coming through a window, leaving its impression on the ground, and you would focus on the light on the ground as representing light. Or at night, if there's a full moon, you can focus on the light of the full moon to get the impression of light. And then one focuses upon that as representing light, light, light. And then the 10th kasina is a limited space. Again, this one is a little obscure to me, but one just sort of blocks off maybe an empty space and focuses upon that as space, space, space. So that's the classical way of creating the kasina objects. But according to the commentary here, one could gain for the colors, one can gain the initial impression of the color from certain parts of the body. So they say the head hairs as representing the color blue. I guess because in India, most people would have very dark black hair, and somehow in sunlight, that very black hair will give the impression of being blue. So in that way, you could get the impression of the blue from the head hairs. And I said you could also use, for those who have blue eyes, you could look at the blue of their eyes to get the impression of blue. And it seems that this kind of approach would work for a meditator who can pick up the mental impression of the object very quickly just by looking at this part of the body. But for most of us, we would have to use a stable object. And in that case, an external kasina object would be more effective. To get the impression of red, one would use blood, if you see blood flowing. To get the impression of white, one could use the whites of the eyes. To get the impression of yellow, I guess you could use somebody who has yellowish skin. In any case, this would be the case of one possessing form, that is, who uses a form object based on the body, and then sees forms externally, who sees forms, either forms from the body, based on the body, or external forms. And then that jhana, the jhana attained in that way, that is called the first emancipation, the emancipation of one possessing form, that is, who has the form jhana, who sees these forms either internally or externally. The second emancipation, the Pali reads, Ajatanga rupa sanyi bahida rupani pasati. So one not perceiving forms internally sees forms externally. And then the commentary explains that one who is not perceiving forms internally is one who does not attain the form jhanas based on his own head hairs and so forth, but who will see the forms based on an external object, setting up the kasina externally. So what is shown by this are those who attain the form jhanas externally by doing the preliminary work externally, that is, using as the preliminary object a material kasina object that is created by using a blue, red, white, or yellow disc. Okay, the third emancipation is explained very, very concisely. So it's said one is focused only on the idea of beauty, of the beautiful. That is the third emancipation. Then comes the explanation. It says that by this, what is shown are jhanas based on extremely purified or extremely beautiful color kasinas. And so it's a little puzzling. How do you distinguish this emancipation, the third emancipation, from the second emancipation? And it seems that the degree of beauty or purity of the object, to me, it seems to be a very, very subjective criterion. But another canonical work called the Patisambhidamagga defines the emancipation on the beautiful as the four immeasurable states. That is, as loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity. But it's still a bit obscure to me how, if one takes the beautiful to be the extremely purified Kristinas, how are these to be distinguished from the second emancipation? Please, everybody, please. I'm going to have to mute everybody. Okay. Okay, so this is the third emancipation. One is focused, resolved, determined on the idea of the beautiful. And it seems that the first three emancipations are different expressions for the four jhanas, except that they are not, that they don't arrange the jhanas sequentially as first, second, third, and fourth, but all four jhanas can fit into each of these three emancipations. So the first emancipation can include the four jhanas. In the case of one who attains the form jhanas by seeing forms, either internally or externally. The second emancipation also includes the four jhanas. In the case of one who sees the forms externally. And the third emancipation also includes the four jhanas. So the first three emancipations, each of these includes all four jhanas. They're just distinguished in the way they approach the object of the jhanas. But then we come to the next four emancipations, and these are the four formless meditative attainments. So with the fourth emancipation, one overcomes all perceptions of forms, and one takes as the object the infinity of space. And then one enters and dwells in the base of the infinity of space. So to move from the formed jhana to the base of the infinity of space, one turns the attention away from the beautiful form object that is perceived within the jhana. One extends that object till it becomes boundless, and then one turns the attention away from the form of the object to the space occupied by the object. And when the meditation succeeds, then the form vanishes, drops away, and one perceives only that infinite space extending in all directions. The next emancipation is the base of the infinity of consciousness. So to move from the base of the infinity of space to the base of the infinity of consciousness, one directs the attention away from the space to the consciousness which is aware of the infinite space. And then when one can become absorbed in the impression of that consciousness extending throughout space, then one enters the base of the infinity of consciousness. Then to move to the sixth emancipation, one focuses upon the base of infinite consciousness as being without any impediment, without any obstruction. And when one sees the unobstructed nature of that infinite consciousness, that there's nothing impeding it, nothing obstructing it, that is entering and dwelling in the base of nothingness. And then to go to the seventh emancipation, which is the fourth formless meditation, one dwells upon or focuses on the consciousness of the base of nothingness as being so fine and subtle that one cannot say either that it is percipient or non-percipient. So this is the base of neither perception nor non-perception. So those are the four formless meditative attainments, which are the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh emancipations. And these first seven emancipations are potentially accessible to any meditator who is skilled in samadhi. These meditations or these attainments don't require any particular high level of attainment through wisdom. Even somebody who is a non-Buddhist yogi who is very skilled in samadhi can attain these seven emancipations. The eighth emancipation is the cessation of perception and feeling. It's called Sanya Vedayita Nirodha. And this emancipation, it said, is accessible only to non-returners and arhats who have mastered the four jhanas and the four formless meditative attainments. And in this attainment, all mental activity represented by perception and feeling comes to an end, stops. So those are the 8 emancipations. Okay, now we can go back to our original sutta. Okay, so this is the White Lotus Ascetic. And the White Lotus Ascetic is said that one who with the destruction of the taints has realized in his very life the taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom. In other words, this ascetic is an arhat, but this practitioner does not attain the 8 emancipations. And now there's a certain ambiguity here. A certain question comes up from that statement. And I can't find an answer to this, an explicit answer in the suttas themselves. Does this mean that this practitioner doesn't attain any of the 8 emancipations, that he doesn't attain the 4 jhanas and the 4 formless meditations and the attainment of cessation? Or does it mean that this practitioner does not attain all 8 emancipations, but still can attain some of them? There's a kind of mathematical ambiguity or a logical ambiguity. When you say you don't attain 8 emancipations, it can mean you don't attain any of the 8 emancipations, or it can mean you don't attain all of them. The commentary takes the first position, and it says, by this he shows the dry insight arhat, whose virtues are incomplete because he lacks the jhanas, even the 4 jhanas, and the direct knowledges. The direct knowledges are the superpowers, the Chinese shentong, like the ability to multiply the body, to walk through walls, to become invisible, to walk on water, to fly through the sky, and so on. So that meditator is called the dry insight arhat. In Pali, it's sukha vipassika. So the word sukha means dry, and vipassika means one who practices insight, and kinasava is one who has destroyed the defilements. So kinasava means in effect an arhat. So that is the way the commentary takes this. And then let's go on to the next ascetic. So this is the red lotus ascetic. This is the Samana Paduma or Padma. Samana Paduma. And here comes the explanation. With the destruction of the taints, the asavas, the monk has realized for himself with direct knowledge in this very life the taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom. So this practitioner is an arhat, and having entered upon it, he dwells in it, and then he dwells having contacted with the body the 8 emancipations. And again, there is an ambiguity here. Does this mean that the practitioner has attained some of the 8 emancipations, but not necessarily all of them? Or does it mean that he attains all of them? Actually, the expression itself seems to mean that he attains all of them. So if we follow the commentarial explanation, the contrast is between attaining none of them and attaining all of them, which would imply or entail that there will be practitioners who don't attain all 8 emancipations, but can attain several of them. There is another sutta that is found in the Majjhima Nikaya. I thought I had that open. Yeah, this sutta contrasts 2 kinds of arhats. So here it says there is one kind is liberated in both ways. And this is the person, it said, who contacts with the body and dwells in those emancipations that are peaceful and immaterial, transcending forms. So this means attaining the formless emancipations. Starting from the base of infinite space, base of infinite consciousness, base of nothingness, base of neither perception nor non-perception. And his taints are destroyed, so he's an arhat. And then this is contrasted with the other kind of arhat, who is panya-vimutta, liberated by wisdom. And this person does not attain those emancipations that are peaceful, transcending forms. In other words, they don't attain the formless meditative attainments, but his taints are destroyed, so he's an arhat. And this one is called liberated by wisdom. So here we have the contrast between the arhat liberated in both ways and liberated by wisdom. And according to the commentarial definition of the one liberated in both ways, it says that one who possesses any of the formless meditations can count as one liberated in both ways. But in the case of the arhat who's liberated by wisdom, all that is said is that he doesn't attain the formless emancipations, but the one liberated by wisdom can attain the 4 jhanas or can be an arhat without jhanic attainment, according to the commentaries. Okay, let's just finish up the sutta, then we'll take questions. Okay, then the 4th ascetic is called the delicate or refined ascetic among ascetics. And strangely, it doesn't mention anything about this ascetic's meditative attempt. Please mute your microphone. Okay, so it said that this type of ascetic is one who usually uses a robe that's specifically offered to him, eats alms food that is offered to him specifically, uses a lodging that has been dedicated to him, uses medicines that have been dedicated to him. His fellow monks usually behave towards him in agreeable ways by way of body, speech, and mind. They usually present him with what is agreeable, not with what is disagreeable. Usually he dwells in good health. He's seldom ill, and he gains easily, without any trouble, the 4 jhanas, and he's attained the taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom. So he is an arhat who has the 4 jhanas, but the definition doesn't say anything about the relation of this type of ascetic to the formless meditative attainments or to the 8 emancipations. And then the Buddha says that if one could rightly say of anyone that he is a delicate ascetic among ascetics, it's precisely of him that one could say this, because usually the 4 requisites are specifically offered to him. He lives in good health. His disciples behave towards him in agreeable ways, and he attains the 4 jhanas. Okay, at this point, then, we'll take some questions. So that will do for our explanation of the 4 kinds of ascetics. And I think you know if you want to ask a question, you would press the hand symbol. Okay, first is Jia Tang.
Yeah, hi, Big Bodhi. Thank you for taking my question. Where can I get the Book of 8 online, or it's in on the website?
Not yet, but if you want to get all the books together, then you can acquire the complete numerical discourses of the Buddha. Where are you living?
Westchester.
Oh,
New York.
then it's easily available through Wisdom Publications or through
Okay.
Amazon. It's the
I do
numerical
that.
discourses. You get
Thank you.
the entire Anguttara Nikaya translation there.
Thank you very much.
Okay, see you.
Bhante, thank you. You mentioned about the Cheto Vimutti, and you mentioned about the Sunyato Cheto Vimutti.
Yeah.
And I was under the impression all this time that the anatta, the practice of anatta, that was exclusive to Buddhist teaching, at least based on all the other religions I've seen around. Is that?
Oh, that is true. But it's possible through the contemplation of non-self not to take it to the point of gaining the path and fruit, but one could use that to gain a kind of temporary liberation of mind, a kind of samadhi. This is mentioned in Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 43, towards the end of the sutta. It speaks about the contemplation of non-self as leading to a kind of samadhi that's called the emptiness samadhi.
So, Bhante, it is not based on like how you explain, like, for example, with regard to 5 aggregates, not seeing a self with regard to any of those 5 aggregates. It's not a samadhi that comes through that sort of understanding.
Let me just see how it's explained. Let me just get the book. Yeah, the way it's explained in the sutta number 43 of the Majjhima Nikaya, it says, what is the liberation of mind through emptiness? Here, the monk gone to the forest reflects thus, this is empty of a self or of what belongs to a self. That is called the emancipation of mind through emptiness. Yeah, that's all that's said.
Oh, I see. So it is very similar to what we would have practiced with regard to 5 aggregates.
It seems so, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Wiley?
Thank you, Bhante. I actually have several questions, but I'll try to
Yeah,
prioritize one.
you have to choose the one that's urgent.
I guess a quick terminology question first. You translated sukha a little earlier as dry. Can't that also be translated as joy?
No, that's a different word.
Oh,
That
did I get the spelling wrong, or did I get the spelling wrong?
Yeah, that is sukha with KH. This has KK. This has KKH.
Sorry, my mistake.
Yeah, so this sukha represents, it's Sanskrit. Oops.
Okay.
Suksha.
Yeah. Since that was a misfire, can I have another question?
Okay.
All right. The definition of samana, linguistically, it comes from the same Indo-European roots as shaman, which is actually an older religious functionary. Do you have any insights or comments about a possible overlap in the concepts?
I doubt that they are from the same root.
Really? That was according to my research. Okay, I'll recheck that too.
You have to check that because the word samana is from the verbal root shram, which means the original sense of shram is to strive, to make an exertion. You could check that, but I'm doubtful.
I will double check that. Thank you, but I'm okay. I appreciate the time. Yeah. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, let's see who's next. Mia?
Hello, Venerable. I wish I were able to understand. So I'm wondering, could you please give me some more explanation about what is the image of counterpart object? For instance, maybe based on the color, based on blue.
It's hard to explain in words. But one begins with a mental object. After one begins with the physical object, the blue disc on cardboard or wood, until one gets a mentally visualized object. And then one goes on meditating using the mentally visualized object as the focal point until when the mind gets deeply absorbed into that blue mental object. Then it's said that there emerges from this the counterpart sign, which is sort of like a bright, radiant, I call it self-sustaining representation of the blue disc. Yeah, that's all I could say about it. The rest is a matter of experience of it.
It means that if I can focus on the mental blue object, then I can no longer use the material, the external material.
Yeah, it said when you're able to see the object inwardly with your mind's eye as clearly as you see the physical object, then you don't have to rely on the physical object anymore.
Thank you.
Okay, we take Vinyu.
Yes, good morning, Bhante.
Good morning.
I have one question in relation to the 8 emancipations.
Yeah.
The white
Your voice is breaking up.
rupa jhanas.
Yeah.
But Nirvana, Buddha, before he went into Paranirvana, he actually went up to the 9th jhana. Sorry, can you hear me?
Okay, now
Can
I
you
hear
hear
you.
me?
Okay, now I hear. No, there seems to be something wrong with your connection. We'll come back to you because time is running. Okay, I'll have to take Samantha.
Thank you, Bhante. I just want to clarify, I think it's sort of related from the previous question as well. I'm a bit confused now because are we saying now with the 8 jhanas, one can gain wisdom and become an arhat, or with the 4 jhanas, and how this relates to the satipatthana, the satipatthana sutta as well, to gain the knowledge, because I was under the impression that with the 8 jhanas, you're only temporarily suppressing the 5 hindrances.
Yeah.
So how can one then become an arahant?
Well,
with wisdom?
After gaining the jhanas, then one has to go on to cultivate insight or wisdom.
Yeah.
And then the practice of the satipatthana would become more relevant in the process of cultivating for insight and wisdom.
So when Bhante says wisdom, is that the knowledge of anicca, dukkha, anatta?
Right, yeah.
Right. And did Buddha actually go through all the 8 jhanas and then finally became and went to Nibbana? Is that how he became and went to the Parinibbana, like the lady before was asking?
Well, it said in the in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta that the Buddha went through the 8 jhanas, then he went to the state of the cessation of perception and feeling. Then he emerged from that and then went down to the 4th jhana. Well, he went down to the 1st jhana.
Right.
Then he went back from the 1st jhana to the 4th jhana, and he attained a final nirvana, parinibbana, from the 4th jhana.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Bhante. Thank you for that explanation.
Okay. Let's take Sud.
Thank you, Bhante, for taking my question. So when you're doing the kasina meditation, the arising of the other like self-sustaining counterpart object, is that equivalent to the 1st jhana? I mean, are you sort of entering like this nimitta state and going into the 1st jhana? Or
No, it's not yet the 1st jhana. When the counterpart sign arises,
right.
In the system of the Visuddhi, of the commentaries and Visuddhimagga, that is called access concentration. It means one is getting close to the 1st jhana, but not yet in it.
I see. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're wrong.
Bhante, I just want to get clarification on your answer to Siyu about Sunyato Ceto Vimutti. So we understand that that's actually attainment of concentration, but does it have any association to attainment of wisdom at all?
You know, all I know about it is what is said in that particular passage. So it's, I would say it's a kind of wisdom, but it's not here, it's not related to the, and of course it's based on the contemplation of insight, but it's not set in this passage, it's not set in relation to the stages culminating in liberation.
Thank you, Bhante.
I don't know what further could be said about it, because it only occurs, to my knowledge, that explanation occurs only in this particular passage.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back to Vinyu and see if we could get you more clearly now.
Yes, Bhante, sorry, my line was breaking off.
Yeah.
It's actually regarding the ninth jhana that Buddha went through before he went into parinirvana. And so it's not necessary to go up to the ninth jhana of the cessations of feeling and perception. Is it necessary? I mean, when one actually practicing to the arupa jhana?
No, certainly it's not necessary to go to the ninth, not even necessary to get the arupa jhanas. Only if one aspires to become a red lotus ascetic, then one will go for the all 9 attainments.
Right. Is that true that when you get to the arupa jhana, basically the wisdom level actually coming down?
I've never found anything like that in the text.
Right. Okay.
It's
right.
just
Thank
that
you.
it's just that people can be, they get a kind of pleasure because of the tranquility and equanimity of the arupa jhanas, and so they might develop a subtle attachment to that state and not be motivated to develop wisdom. Okay,
sorry,
Daya.
I couldn't. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, we'll take Dayani.
Yes, good morning, Bhante.
Good morning.
So my question is, the color seen in Kasina practice, is it called nimitta, Bhante?
The object is called a nimitta, yeah.
Okay, is that color seen in Kasina practice similar to the color seen in some meditators who have a very deep meditation but not Kasina practice?
I guess one can gain color nimittas without basing it on a kasina.
Okay.
Even through mindfulness of breathing, an object can arise that's like a kasina. So it becomes a color nimitta, but it's not developed deliberately through a kasina object.
Right. Thank you, Bhante. So if this color seen in the practice not kasina object, is it considered a sign if they were to develop further can take them to jhana?
Yeah, that nimitta will be able to carry them to the jhanas. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
It doesn't have to be the kasina.
Right. Thank you very much, Bhante.
Okay, Mia, did you have another question?
Yes, Venerable. I want to ask the relationship between jhana and emancipation. And another question is about, is it possible to attend arhatship without attend any jhana?
According to the commentaries, as we saw with this expression, sukha vipassika arhat, the sukha vipassika arhat, the dry insight arhat, is an arhat who achieves arhatship without attaining the jhanas.
Well, it's based on the commentary, but not from the sutra.
In the suttas, I have to say, there's not a clear presentation on that particular issue. The standard map of the path to arhatship in the suttas shows the attainment of the 4 jhanas, and then based on the jhanas, the attainment of arhatship. But there are many passages, especially in the Anguttara Nikaya, where a monk comes to the Buddha and asks for guidance, and the Buddha will give the monk instructions in developing insight without mentioning the practice leading to jhana. And so that seems to be instructing, to be giving instructions in the mode that leads to the attainment of dry insight arhatship. But it's not explicitly said in the suttas that there is such a thing as a dry insight arhat. Okay, we're going to have to end now for the day. So I will do a quick sharing of the merits. And so we take the merits from our practice today, the practice of meditation, the Dhamma discussion, Dhamma study, and we dedicate and share these merits with the devas, the Dhamma protecting deities, the nagas, the dragon spirits, and then with all sentient beings. I'm losing my voice. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahedika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sahasanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahedika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahedika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Bhavagopadaya vichihetato etantare satakayupapanna rupya rupicha sanya sanino tukha pamuchantu pusantu nibuting.
Sadhu, sadhu,
Sadhu, sadhu,
Okay, so thank you all for
sadhu.
participating.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you very much, Bhante.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you,
Okay.
Bhante.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Bhante.
We love you.
Take
Yes,
care.
we all love you. We are respecting you.
Okay.
We love you, Bhante.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, I'll sign off now.